At the edge of the harbor of Alexandria, where the sea sighs softly against worn stone, the night settles like a cool, dark shawl around the city. Oil lamps glimmer along the quays, scattered dots of amber light reflected on the gentle swells of the water. The sky above is a deep and quiet blue, with early stars appearing one by one, like careful thoughts. I walk slowly along the familiar path that traces the harbor curve, my sandals whispering against the dust. The air smells of salt and faint tar, mixed with the distant sweetness of figs from a nearby stall that has not yet fully closed for the night. Behind me, the sounds of the city soften, the last calls of vendors, a cart rolling over stone, the low murmur of sailors trading words in languages I will never fully know. Far out, standing guard over all of this, the Pharos lighthouse sends its slow, steady light across the water. Each rotation is unhurried. Each circle of light feels like the turning of a page in a very large, very patient book. Tonight, like so many nights, I am walking home from the library. I pull my thin wool shawl closer, though the air is mild. I enjoy the feeling of being wrapped in something light and steady. The day's work still clings to me, the faint smell of papyrus fibers, the imagined dust of distant lands, the quiet of the reading rooms. I am tired, but the gentle kind of tired that arrives after a day of careful concentration, not frantic work. It is the sort of tired that invites sleep in smooth, soft waves. Before I sleep, though, I silently trace the familiar shape of my day, as if rereading a scroll that I know by heart. It begins with the morning light over Alexandria, with the sound of the sea, with the quiet footsteps through the colonnades of the Mouseion, and the hushed breath of the Library of Alexandria itself, my place, my world. Tonight, as you listen, you may walk with me through that world, step by step, until your thoughts, too, grow as soft as lamplight. I live in Alexandria during the reign of Ptolemaic kings, in the centuries after Alexander's conquests. The city is young compared to the ancient lands around it, but it feels already old to me, as if age comes not only from years but from thoughts gathered and preserved. Here, in this meeting place of Egypt and the Hellenistic world, languages layer over each other like translucent cloth. Greek is the tongue of scholars and officials, of decrees and philosophy. Egyptian words drift through markets and temples, older than the stones under our feet. Traders bring with them the sounds of Phoenicia, Judea, Mesopotamia, and lands even farther east. Sometimes, in the library's acquisition hall, I hear phrases I cannot identify, sharp and musical, carried by men who have followed caravans or ships for months. The library itself stands near the Mouseion, the seat of the Muses, as we call it, a place of study supported by the Ptolemaic court. Learned men, and a few quiet women like me who find their way in through other paths, live and work there, teaching, writing, copying, observing the heavens, and measuring the earth. They say the library holds hundreds of thousands of scrolls, histories, poems, plays, medical treatises, mathematical works, fragments of older wisdom written in careful script. Some speak of 500,000 scrolls, others of fewer, but to me, the number is simply more than I can ever read in one lifetime. My work is modest. I am a copyist and a keeper of order, the daughter of a minor scribe who once recorded cargoes in the royal harbor. My father's careful letters, once made with reed pen and ink on shipping tablets, trained my hands and my eyes. When he died, a friend who knew my skill spoke for me at the library. I was allowed to assist. It is not a grand position. I am not a philosopher or a grand mathematician. I do not develop theories of the stars or calculate the circumference of the earth. I do not teach in the lecture halls. But I hold in my hands the words of those who do. I trace them onto fresh papyrus, line by line, letter by letter, so they may live longer than we do. In a city like ours, knowledge travels on ships and walks on tired feet, wrapped in cloth or stored in travelers' minds. The library tries to catch those traveling thoughts and hold them still, like a quiet harbor. From such a harbor, the mind can launch again, smooth and slow, into the vast sea of ideas. My mornings begin with light. The sun rises over the roofs of the city and spills into our small courtyard, turning the whitewashed walls a soft gold. The birds, sparrows and doves mostly, flutter and call on the rafters and on neighboring roofs. In the distance, beyond the line of houses, I can hear the low breathing of the harbor, the creak of masts, the slap of water against hulls, the occasional call of a sailor greeting another in a rough, cheerful tone. I wake on a simple pallet stuffed with straw, covered with linens that smell faintly of the soap my mother once made from oil and ash. My mother is gone now, but her method remains. The scent is a small, steady memory. I wash my face with water from the jar near the door, the clay cool against my fingers. The water is slightly chill in the early hour, and it brings me fully into the day. I tie my hair back with a simple band, then drape a chiton over my shoulders, pinning it carefully. A light shawl goes over it, practical and modest. The street outside is still quiet when I step out. Dust lies undisturbed, and the air is crisp before the heat arrives. A few neighbors are sweeping their thresholds, bristles whispering across stone. A boy runs past with a basket of bread, its warm smell trailing behind him. I start my walk toward the library. The city is laid out in long, straight streets, a pattern inherited from the plans of the early city builders. Columns line some of the main avenues, and the footing is uneven between stone and packed earth. Shops face the street with their fronts open, like boxes with one side removed, pottery here, linen there, small charms, oil, and wine. The colors are mostly soft, earth tones, faded blues, the occasional bright cloth hung out to catch the eye. As I approach the quarter of the Mouseion, the sounds change. There are fewer market cries and more measured voices in conversation. Steps echo slightly in the shaded colonnades. A breeze slips through the space between columns, smelling of distant sea and cooling stone. The library rises ahead, not as a single building, but as a complex of halls, courtyards, and chambers. It is not as grand as some imagine when they speak of it in distant places. It is not carved in gold or covered with stained glass. Instead, it has the studied simplicity of a place designed for thinking, tall rooms for scrolls, airy reading spaces, courtyards planted with trees that rustle lightly in the wind. This is where I spend my days, where time seems to slow into a gentle, steady rhythm. As I step inside, the change is always the same, the outer chatter falls away, and the stillness of the library folds around me. It is not silent, no place full of people ever is, but the sounds here are small and careful. Reed pens scratch faintly on papyrus. Sandals slide softly over stone. Low voices murmur questions and answers. A cough, a shifting of a stool, the creak of a shelf, these are the sounds of our work. The light in the halls is filtered, entering through high openings and inner courtyards. It falls in pale bands across the floor, catching dust motes that drift slowly, weightless. When the sun moves, the light shifts with it, and I sometimes mark the progress of the day by the paths these pale beams trace along the walls. The scroll rooms are lined with shelves and pigeonholes, each holding rolled papyrus tied with soft cord or a strip of linen. At the ends, small tags note the work's contents, the name of the author, the subject, sometimes the city it came from. Here, knowledge is not just thought, it is organized, sorted, made retrievable. My place is in one of the copying rooms. A wide wooden table stands near a window that opens into a courtyard. Outside, fig trees spread their branches, and their leaves cast a gentle shifting pattern of shade. Sometimes, when the air stirs, the leaves rustle like distant rain. On the table rests my current work, a scroll from an older collection, beginning to show its age. The edges have grown fragile, the ink faded in places. My job is to copy its contents onto fresh papyrus, preserving what time and handling might otherwise erase. I sit, settle my feet, and take a slow breath. The day's rhythm begins. Line by line. Letter by letter. Thought by thought. I unroll a portion of the old scroll and place a blank sheet of papyrus beside it. The fibers of the new sheet run in a careful pattern, horizontal on one side, vertical on the other, the result of patient pressing and drying. When I run my fingers lightly along it, it feels faintly ridged, like the memory of reeds. I dip my reed pen into ink, made from soot, gum, and water. The tip of the pen, cut at a slant and sharpened carefully with a small knife, holds just enough ink for a few words. I let the excess drip back into the small ink pot, then touch the pen to the papyrus and begin. The letters form themselves, practiced and calm. I have been doing this for years, and in that time my writing has grown more confident. Each letter has a clear shape that balances the one before and after it. The lines flow from left to right, at an even slant, like gentle furrows in a field. I read a phrase from the original scroll, hold it lightly in my memory, then set it down on the new sheet. When the text is particularly dense, I break it into shorter pieces, moving back and forth between old and new in a slow, steady rhythm. My lips sometimes move without sound as I follow the words, to keep their order precise. Around me, other copyists and assistants work in similar ways. Some copy poetry, their faces occasionally softening at a remembered line. Others copy historical accounts, lists of rulers, or descriptions of battles long past. A few work on medical texts, their pages marked with diagrams of bones or plants, scrolls that might one day guide a physician's hand. From the adjacent room, I can hear a translator muttering gently to himself as he moves between scripts and languages, transforming words carried by one alphabet into another. Above us, the library's higher scholars move through their own tasks, compiling catalogs, comparing versions of texts, debating their meanings in quiet corners or shaded courtyards. But the pace of their conversations here is measured. This is not a place for angry arguments or sudden gestures. It is a place where ideas take their time. As the hours pass, the light in the room shifts. The fresh papyrus grows covered in neat lines of text. At intervals, I pause to rest my hand and eyes, letting them drift toward the courtyard outside. A breeze may stir the leaves, a bird might hop along a branch, tilting its head, a gardener may bend to clear a stray weed from the paths. These gentle, unobtrusive movements keep me grounded in the world beyond the words. When the sun climbs high and the light in the halls grows bright and deliberate, we set aside our pens and leave the copying rooms. It is time for a simple meal. In a shaded courtyard, we gather with others who work in and around the Mouseion. Low tables are set out with bread, olives, cheese, and sometimes salted fish. There are figs when they are in season, and occasionally dates or nuts. We sit on stools or directly on the low stone ledge that runs along the courtyard walls. The courtyard is cool despite the brightness of the day, thanks to the shadows cast by the surrounding walls and the presence of a small fountain at its center. Water spills gently from a carved stone spout into a shallow basin, its sound continuous and soothing. I sit with a few familiar faces. There is Mouseion, another copyist, who likes to copy verses and will sometimes whisper a line or two of a particularly beautiful passage, more to himself than to us. There is Diodora, who helps in the acquisition hall, recording the arrival of new scrolls and sorting them by subject. And there is Achilles, a quiet man who assists an astronomer by tracking observations of the stars. Our conversations are light and unhurried. Did the ships from Rhodes arrive? Someone will ask Diodora. 2 of them, she might reply. Mostly trade goods. But one merchant carried a collection of poems. They are being examined before they come to the catalogues. Achilles might mention that his teacher observed a star that seemed slightly out of place the previous night, and they are trying to determine if it is truly new or simply recorded elsewhere under another name. I say little, mostly listening, watching the play of light on the fountain's surface. The water ripples gently, endlessly changing, yet somehow constant. When I do speak, it is usually about my work. The scroll I copy now mentions lands beyond our maps, I might say. Places where the air grows thick and hot, and the soil is red. I wonder how much of it is observation and how much is the imagination of the traveler. Mouseion smiles softly and shrugs. Even if some of it is embellishment, it tells us what people hoped for or feared. That, too, is worth preserving. We eat slowly, unbothered by haste. There is nowhere we must rush to. The library will not vanish if we take an extra moment to watch the water, to feel the weight ease from our shoulders, to let our thoughts drift. The afternoon will come, with its continued work, but for now the day hangs in a gentle pause, like a long breath held between sentences. On some days, after the meal, I am asked to help in the acquisition hall. Today is such a day. Instead of returning immediately to my copying table, I follow Diodora through a side passage. The air here smells faintly of sea salt and oiled wood. We emerge into a high room with tall doors that open toward the direction of the harbor. Here, newly arrived scrolls are received and examined. Merchants and travelers bring them in, sometimes as gifts from other cities, sometimes as goods to be copied and returned, sometimes as spoils of circumstance, scrolls borrowed from passing ships, copied, and then sent back. The methods are not always simple, or entirely gentle, but the intention is constant, to gather knowledge from as many places as possible. On a long table, several scrolls lie unrolled slightly at one end, just enough to show their script. A scholar bends over them, brows drawn in concentration. This one is from the island of Kos, he says, pointing. It may hold medical notes not yet in our collection. And this one, from Athens, appears to be a legal speech. We must see whether we already have it, or if it is a variant. Diodora makes small, neat notes on a wax tablet, recording origins, subjects, and initial judgments. I stand nearby, waiting to be asked to move a scroll, or to gently smooth its edges if they have curled during travel. I watch the hands of the travelers. They are often sun-darkened, calloused, marked by rope or wind, very different from the ink-stained fingers of the library scholars. Yet in this room, their paths briefly cross. The knowledge they carry meets the place that will keep it. Occasionally, I am asked to read a line aloud if the script is difficult or the language is one I know better than the others. My voice is steady, unhurried, and the words fall into the quiet room like pebbles into still water, sending ripples of meaning outward. Sometimes the scrolls are disappointing, copies of works we already hold, or incomplete fragments. But sometimes, a new text appears, and the room holds a subtle, contained excitement. It is never loud, never chaotic, but there is a feeling of breath drawn in, of minds leaning forward. After the initial examination, the scrolls that are accepted are passed on, some to be catalogued, some to be copied, some to be compared with existing versions. I return to my copying room later in the afternoon, carrying with me the sense that our small, careful work is part of a larger pattern, reaching out beyond the city to many shores. The afternoon in the library has a different quality of light. The sun has moved, and the beams that enter the room are warmer, angled. Dust motes glow more brightly for a time, then fade as the light shifts again. I resume my work, the pen once more in my hand, the papyrus unrolled just enough. Line by line. Letter by letter. My eyes move steadily, unhurried. When they feel strained, I pause and let them rest on the distant wall or the courtyard beyond. I listen to the gentle sounds, the scrape of a chair, the soft clearing of a throat, the rustle of movement along the shelves. Occasionally, a scholar steps into the copying room to see how much progress has been made on a particular text. Their questions are polite. How many sections completed, one might ask, looking over my shoulder. For so far, I reply calmly. The 5th will be finished by the end of the day. They nod, satisfied, and move on. There is no shouting, no impatient tapping of feet. They, too, know that this work cannot be rushed without risk of error. Outside, the city continues its own rhythm, markets, harbor, homes, temples. But here, time stretches, smooth and quiet, like a long corridor with evenly spaced doors. In the late afternoon, when the light finally begins to soften, we prepare to set aside our work. The pens are cleaned, their tips wiped gently, excess ink removed. The ink pots are covered. The scrolls, both old and newly copied, are rolled carefully and tied. I touch the finished scrolls with the back of my fingers for a moment, feeling the slight give of the papyrus, the latent warmth from the day. These are the weight of thought, made tangible. When I emerge from the library, the day is already beginning to tilt toward evening. The streets are a little busier than in the morning, as people finish their tasks and move toward home or toward the marketplace for last purchases. Children's voices echo faintly inside alleys. A woman closes the wooden shutters of her shop with a hollow knock. Somewhere, a dog barks once, then settles. The sky above Alexandria deepens from blue to soft violet. Clouds, if there are any, become thin pale streaks. As I walk, I see lamps being lit one by one, small open dishes filled with oil, their wicks flickering into steady flame. The light they cast is warm and limited, creating small islands of brightness in the growing dark. I take again my path toward the harbor. It is not the shortest route to my home, but it is the one I prefer. The smell of the sea comforts me, its constancy steadies my thoughts. At the harbor, the water reflects the sky and the growing lamps. Ships are moored close in, their hulls dark shapes, their rigging a delicate web against the dim light. The sounds here are gentle now, the day's clamor has faded. I hear the creak of a rope, the soft thud of a basket being set down, low voices exchanging last words before rest. Beyond them all, the Pharos lighthouse stands tall on its island, its height unmistakable even in the dimming light. Soon, its great fire will burn bright, and mirrors will send its beams sweeping across the water. The thought of it pleases me, a light created and maintained by human hands, guiding ships through darkness. I stand for a few moments and watch. The air cools slowly against my skin. A breeze moves across the water and brings the faint taste of salt to my lips. In the distance, maybe, a musician plucks the strings of a lyre, the notes drifting on the air, soft and slow. The city, which by day can feel loud and busy, now grows hushed. A different kind of life awakens, the life of rest, of quiet conversation at home, of sleep beginning to gather at the edges of people's thoughts. I turn away from the harbor and make my way back through narrower streets toward my small dwelling. My home is modest, but it is enough. A single main room, with a small side space, opens into the little courtyard. The walls are plain, but on one side I keep a wooden shelf with a few scrolls of my own, copies of works that were permitted to be duplicated for private use, gifts from grateful scholars, or texts my father once owned. When I enter, I light a small lamp, turning the wick until the flame is quiet and steady. Its light pools on the low table by the wall, deepening shadows in the corners of the room. It is not bright, but bright enough for simple tasks. I place my shawl on its peg, wash my hands and face again with cool water, and sit on the reed mat. My body loosens bit by bit, the tension in my shoulders and neck fades as the familiar space surrounds me. Outside, in neighboring houses, I can hear muffled sounds, a family speaking softly, a clay pot being moved, a brief laugh. These are not intrusive noises, they are like the background hum of the sea, evidence of life, steady and gentle. On some evenings, if I am not too tired, I unroll one of my private scrolls to read a little, not as a copyist but as a listener to old voices. Tonight I choose a text that speaks not of war or politics, but of simple observations of the natural world, descriptions of birds, fish, and plants, notes about the phases of the moon. I read slowly, my lips barely moving, letting the words settle in my mind at an easy pace. The lamp's light touches the papyrus, making the ink appear almost glossy in places. The air is mild, and occasionally a hint of night breeze moves through the half-open shutter, making the lamp flame flicker, then steady again. I imagine the person who wrote these lines, wherever they once sat, perhaps under a different sky, in a different city. Their hand, like mine, held a reed pen, their eyes, like mine, moved along the lines they formed. Across time and distance, a thought travels, carried on the simplest tools. As I read, my breathing slows. The words become less important than the rhythm of reading itself, the gentle back and forth of eye and thought. Sleep begins to cast its first shadows along the edges of my awareness, quiet and patient. Some nights, before I finally lie down, my mind drifts back through the library in memory, as if I am walking once more through its halls, only now they are even quieter, emptied of people, filled only with the soft presence of stored thought. In my mind, I walk along the shelves and see the scrolls arranged by subject, poetry, history, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, plays, speeches, tales of travel. Each scroll is a small, rolled fragment of someone's mind, preserved. I imagine the librarians who catalog them, assigning numbers and notes, tracing connections between works. I think of the astronomers who, on clear nights, climb to rooftops with their instruments, mapping the stars in careful diagrams. I think of mathematicians drawing figures in sand or wax, proving the relationships between lines and shapes. I think of physicians studying anatomy and herbs, of historians comparing versions of events as told by different witnesses, seeking the most reliable account. I think of poets shaping words to carry emotions and ideas in patterns of sound and rhythm. In this mental walk, the library is like a sleeping creature, vast and calm. Its heartbeat is the slow accumulation of knowledge, measured not in days but in years, even generations. I am a small part of it, a single hand among many, writing letters that join to form words, that join to form thoughts. The work is quiet, almost invisible, but it matters. A text preserved may one day help someone far away, or far in the future, understand a star, heal an illness, build a ship, or simply feel less alone. Knowing this lets me rest more easily. The memory of the halls fades as I return to the small circle of lamplight in my own room. I set aside the scroll I have been reading, roll it gently, and place it back on the shelf. The lamp now burns low. I pinch the wick a little so that the flame is smaller, softer. The shadows in the room grow wider, merging with each other, becoming less distinct. The world narrows to the warmth of my palate, the quiet of my breathing, and the distant, constant murmur of the city. I lie down, drawing the light cover over myself. The woven fibers are familiar against my skin. I turn onto my side, facing the window where a faint ribbon of night sky is visible. A star glimmers there, one of many that the astronomers might measure and name. To me, it is simply a point of light, steady, high above all the concerns of the day. Somewhere beyond the city, the waves continue their slow, eternal rhythm, washing against the shore. The Pharos lighthouse sends its beam across the water, turning and turning, a calm, relentless guardian of the harbor. My thoughts drift in slow circles, like that beam of light. I think of the scrolls resting on their shelves, the ink drying on the ones completed today. I think of the new texts waiting to be copied, the ones that will arrive on future ships. I think of the countless hands and minds that contribute to this quiet gathering of understanding. All of it continues whether I am awake or asleep. And so, letting go of my part in it for now, I allow my breathing to deepen. I feel the weight of my body settle fully into the palate, the last tension in my muscles dissolving. The lines of text I copied today fade from sharp words into gentle, indistinct shapes. The sounds of the city blur into one soft hum. The small light of the lamp becomes, in my mind, like a distant star, and then that, too, grows dim. In this quiet, in this slow, historical city by the sea, surrounded by scrolls and lamps and the deep night sky, I let myself drift into sleep. The library will be there in the morning. The sea will still be breathing against the harbor stones. The light will return, and with it, the calm, steady work of another day. Until then, there is only the quiet, and the slow, soothing passage of the night.